Good morning. Welcome back. You're watching World News and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. Russian bombs and drones once again fell on Ukraine overnight. We're now moving to Kyiv, where our correspondent Oz Katerji is this very moment. Good morning, Oz. So what was the last night like in Ukraine?
Well, it was a very, very difficult night for the Ukrainian Air Force. They reported 214 Russian drones entered Ukrainian territory. Now, for context, since that phone conversation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, Russia has increased day on day the size of its drone attacks. So every day since that phone conversation, there have been more drones sent by the Russians, with 214 sent overnight, with attacks in Odessa, injuring 3 people and leaving power outages. So despite this energy infrastructure ceasefire that was declared, the Russians have continued to hit energy infrastructure in Odessa, Zaporizhia. 6 people were injured in Zaporizhia and 4 people were injured in attacks in Dnipropetrovsk. 2 people have been killed in attacks over the last 24 hours. Now, the Ukrainians, for their part, also responded with an attack on an oil depot in Krasnodar. So the idea that there's some sort of energy ceasefire in place right now is not borne out by the reality on the ground. Russia continues to strike targets inside Ukraine, and Ukraine continues to retaliate against Russia. Now, there was also an attack on the gas pipeline metering station in Sudzha that saw an explosion where the Ukrainians were pushed out of there over the last couple of weeks. However, the Ukrainians have firmly denied having anything to do with that explosion. Now, despite these attacks, the Ukrainians are still feeling encouraged by the signs they're hearing from the White House and still believe that this ceasefire may have this proposal may have legs to it. We spoke to Timothy Milovanov, a former Minister of Economy and President of the Kyiv School of Economics, to hear what he had to say about the situation. Let's take a listen to that.
My personal view on this is overall things are going better than I expected they could. And there is some convergence, even though there's nothing specific in the news, but there is some convergence to a reasonable ceasefire deal. And it probably will be something along the contact line, separation de facto, some agreement not to shoot at each other with some, small minor violations, anyway. We have seen that in 2014, 2016. So something like that will happen. I think it has become very clear that the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia is in play, which for Ukraine, in my view, is very good news, because before that started, I thought, the nuclear power plant is basically gone. Russians will keep it. There are all these discussions about NATO, impossibility, neutrality, so that will have to be worked out further down the road.
So while it's clear that the Ukrainians are hoping that the ceasefire does come into effect, the reality on the ground today is that there are still Russian strikes against energy infrastructure targets inside Ukraine. Back to you in the studio, Klaudia.
Thank you so much. Oz Katerji reporting live from Kyiv. According to German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, after the first day of the EU summit in Brussels, Ukraine can continue to rely on the EU for support. On top of that, Scholz announced that Germany will provide Ukraine with 7 billion euros in military support.
First and foremost, this means that we aim to continue and organize the support for Ukraine by providing weapons and other kinds of assistance, continuing what we set in motion, especially with regard to the loan that the G7 countries have provided, and the European Union contributes to that, and all the other measures that we have agreed upon. This year again, Germany will be the country that will provide the greatest share of the support. The upcoming amendment of our constitution will prepare the ground for us to make available 7 billion euro this year for military support. This is by far the biggest contribution here in Europe, and we do this in order to ensure that the country can continue to defend its independence and sovereignty.
According to Kyiv, the Russian army switched its tactics to attacking civilian targets in Ukraine with large drone swarms. Russian attacks civilian infrastructure in Ukraine, and Vladimir Putin calls it a ceasefire, said Daria Zarvina, a communications advisor to the Ukrainian president.
Russia has chosen the tactic of massive drone attacks on civilian infrastructure of Ukrainian cities. The attacks are targeted and Putin calls it a ceasefire.
Russia has attacked the Odessa region again, and civilian infrastructure has been damaged. Large-scale fires broke out, a shopping center was burned, and a high-rise building was damaged. According to preliminary information, 3 teenagers were injured.
French President Emmanuel Macron has said he will host a meeting of European leaders next Thursday. The goal of the meeting will be to discuss ways to expedite military support for Ukraine and draw up plans to upgrade the Ukrainian military after a possible peace deal.
Next Thursday, we will be holding a summit of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris, with President Zelensky attending. And we will be finalizing our work on short-term support for the Ukrainian army, on defending a sustainable and viable Ukrainian army model to prevent Russian invasions, and on security guarantees that European armies can provide. We are determined to achieve a solid and lasting peace, and so we have obviously supported the American-Ukrainian proposal for a 30-day ceasefire to allow such discussions to begin. And in this respect, Russia's very disappointing partial response, I hope, is only a momentary refusal. In any case, this approach confirms something we have been saying for several months, namely, that Russia does not sincerely want peace at this stage.
President Trump said on Thursday that the U.S. will soon sign a minerals and natural resources deal with Ukraine. At an event in Washington, D.C., Trump went on to claim that his efforts to achieve a peace deal for Kyiv were going, quote, pretty well.
I also signed an executive order to dramatically increase production of critical minerals and rare earths. It's a big thing in this country, and as you know, we're also signing agreements in various locations to unlock rare earths and minerals and lots of other things all over the world, but in particular Ukraine. We're doing very well with regard to Ukraine and Russia, and one of the things we are doing is signing a deal very shortly with respect to rare earths with Ukraine, which they have tremendous value in rare earth, and we appreciate that. And we spoke yesterday with, as you know, President Putin and President Zelensky, and we would love to see that come to an end, and I think we're doing pretty well in that regard. So hopefully we could save thousands of people a week from dying. That's what it's all about. They're dying.
Swedish lawmakers have given the green light for 8 multi-role fighter jets to be stationed in Poland as part of a NATO mission to oversee the transfer of military aid to Ukraine. The Gripen planes will be in Poland from May 1st to August 31st. The deployment was announced by Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, center-right government, in early March. Swedish lawmakers said that taking part in the air mission in Poland was another step in Sweden's commitment to NATO. Sweden joined NATO last March, 2 years after Russia's invasion of Ukraine forced Stockholm to rethink its national security policy. The mission will see up to 150 Swedish military personnel deployed to Poland, including pilots and ground staff. The president of Panama, José Raúl Mulino, says he is not concerned about reports that the U.S. military is exploring ways to ensure full U.S. access to the Panama Canal because they came from anonymous sources.
It's one of the world's key shipping routes, one that US President Donald Trump says he wants to take back. But Panama's President José Raúl Mulino has dismissed anonymous reports that the US military is exploring ways to ensure full US access to the Panama Canal.
NBC said that. We have not found any source of that information. In your language, it seemed more like a rehash than anything else. So if no one puts their signature on a statement like that, I don't give it much value.
Mulino's comments follow a report from Reuters news agency that cited 2 US officials saying the Pentagon had been told to look for options. President Trump has publicly stated that he wants to return the shipping route to US control. Earlier this month, Hong Kong-based CK Hutchinson said it had agreed to sell port assets in Panama to a group led by US investment firm BlackRock.
Demand is real in the Pacific. As far as I know, the Port of Balboa and Cristobal transactions progressing slowly as of this morning. I don't want to go into further detail.
For now, it's plain sailing on this vital shipping route as turbulent international interests swirl around it.
London Heathrow Airport, the world's fifth busiest airport, is completely shut down due to a fire at a nearby electrical substation, which caused a mass power outage. Tracking websites show flights avoiding Heathrow. The airport is now without power, and flights all over the world have been disrupted due to the substation blaze. Even the road leading to the airport has been blocked off by the police, as huge fireballs could be seen rising from the facility. The London Fire Brigade reports that around 70 firefighters were deployed to tackle the flames. The cause of the fire remains unknown, but the airport will remain closed for the next 24 hours. Illiberal democracy is dangerous to democracy itself, according to our guest, Jacques Rupnik. Speaking on TVP World's On the Record, Rupnik added that more and more leaders have been using the model. For example, Viktor Orbán and Donald Trump, who regularly attack the independent press.
There is a deeper trend which is not just on countries like Romania or countries of the Balkans, which we have seen, which are even. We have within the European Union a country, say Hungary, which promotes something called illiberal democracy, and it started with assault on independent media, on independent judiciary, etc. So you still have elections. But you do not have a level playing field. And we thought this was an anomaly. And then you look at the United States and you discover you have a democratically elected president who attacks exactly that. He attacks the independent judiciary when they decide in a way unfavorable to him. He attacks the media, he attacks, etc. So the illiberal model, which we thought was an anomaly, is unfortunately is spreading among established democracies, even within the European Union. And that will make the future task of holding free and fair elections even more important, because they will be contested. And as soon as the results of elections are contested, which may well happen in Romania, which we have discussed earlier, but which has happened in the United States in the last elections, not the latest, but the previous one under Donald Trump.
To learn more about the issues currently plaguing democracy, visit the TVP World's YouTube channel, where you will find the latest episode of On the Record. Glaciers around the world are melting faster than ever, according to a UNESCO report released on Friday. The rapid ice loss, largely attributed to global warming, may have fatal consequences for our species.
We had an increasing loss by glacier ice year by year by year, accumulating in this incredible number of about 9,000 gigatons of ice lost since 1975. Now, this is just a huge number and hard to imagine. So again, if you take the example of Germany, it would be an ice block of the size of Germany with a thickness of 25 meters. That is the ice that we lost since 1975 from glaciers. That's bad news. Glaciers might disappear on the current melting rates within this century, but there's a second bad news. Even if these glaciers are gone, the glacier melt continues in the polar regions, will kick in, and so will continue to melt and further increase sea levels together with the ice sheets in the next centuries. Every 1/10 of a degree of warming that we can avoid will prevent us from 2.5 millimeter of sea level rise from glaciers alone, and again, which prevents about 500,000 of people from exposure to annual flooding.
And so this marks the end of our service, but please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment here on TVP World with more news and features.